It's been quite a year for JavaScript, from the huge push towards the server, to signals, to the Angular renaissance, to all sorts of new tooling appearing almost every day. I feel like 2023 is a year for the books in terms of the impact it's had not just on JavaScript, but the web as a whole. As such, the JavaScript survey is more important now than it's ever been, which is why I want to take the time to do it with y'all, and also make sure the link's in the description so you can do it if you haven't already. The end date is December 15th, so if you want to do it soon so that all of our input can be part of the results here. It's a really important survey, and I know I'm not the only person using this to make technical decisions about the things they build and the direction they're going in with their projects. So without further ado, let's take a look at the survey. JavaScript started its life as a browser language and then went on to conquer servers with Node. And in 2013, it seems the ecosystem as a whole might finally be ready to try to bridge that gap between features like server components, frameworks like Solid and Quick, and meta frameworks like Next and SvelteKit. Providing a better way of serving code and data to clients has become JavaScript's next big goal. Or should we say TypeScript? At this point, it's become hard to distinguish the two, so let's not even try. Instead, take the survey and help us figure out what's new, what's old, and what async awaits us in the new year to come. Good pun. Let's get started. Features. Welcome to the survey. Yep. Which of these features have you used? Dynamic import? Yep. I'll use it again. Nullish coalescing? I absolutely love. Private fields? Logical assignments? I haven't used this directly, but it's nice. It's an interesting feature. I feel like it's not readable enough for me, but I've not used it, so I'll leave it unchecked. Error cause. Did not know about that. That's actually really nice. That's really nice. That I've used. Which of these? Oh, of course. Match all. Yep. And regex. That I've not used. Replace all is still like my go-to. Funny enough, I've had some issues with replace all because in mobile JavaScript, specifically React Native, a lot of the JavaScript runtimes are out of date enough that they don't actually have replace all support. So yeah, that's always been fun. And then match all is similar, but for regex. I've also had fun issues where I didn't realize that regexes are by default global. So it's possible to have a regex that you run against the same string twice and it gets different results like every other time. Fascinating to see that they have a match all, which should hopefully theoretically fix a lot of those weird behaviors. Yeah, regex in JavaScript's a whole thing. Array.findLast is phenomenal. Array.toSorted. Interesting. So it doesn't actually sort the original array. It creates a new array that is sorted. I've not used that, but that's really nice. That's what it always should have been. Array.toReversed, same deal. I don't need to add those to my reading list. Those are just cool that they exist, and I will actually use those in the future. And then we have Array.Width, which inserts in that position. So in position 2, it inserted a 6. Interesting. Did not know that was a thing. I don't necessarily love the word width for that, but I'm happy it exists. And then toSpliced. So array.width creates a new array with that additional value. Doesn't mutate the original. And then toSpliced mutates the original. I don't love that this has a different syntax with like 1, 0, February. I don't even really know what the 0 does. I'm assuming it's like how far to shift it, but spliced does affect the original array. ToSpliced doesn't mutate either. Okay, then I don't like these examples. I don't like how they made these as different looking as they did. Also, I don't like that there's an additional index there. Clearly, I need to look more into toSpliced. So the difference between with and just setting the value is that you're creating a new array with that one value updated. So in this case, we took the original array 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we made a new array where 3 is replaced with 6. So it's actually pretty handy if you want to take a piece of data and have a slightly different version of that same data. This I could see myself using. toSpliced feels a little more chaotic, but it is nice being able to insert. So curious to see how people use that and how common these things get. Top level await, love it. Promise all. Yes. You know how we feel about promised all settled here, boys. And then promise.any. Any's fun for promises because like when any of these things return, just resolve right now so I know something's done. I have used it. I don't find too many use cases for it, so I'm not going to say I'd want to or not want to use again, but very useful. Good old WebGL. Another one of those things I can't say I necessarily want to use again. I like using WebGL through abstractions like Three.js and React 3 Fiber, but once you get into WebGL directly, it's a little painful because for those who don't know WebGL, it's the graphics layer for the web. So it's writing GPU type stuff. So if you want to do crazy 3D game environments and stuff, that's going to run in a WebGL layer almost always. Yeah. Means you're writing very shadery, low-level code that doesn't necessarily feel like the thing you normally write in the browser. But once you're over that hump, you can make really cool things with it. Web animations. Web animations are cool. I don't have... Is there a web animations API now? Because I'm curious. Allows for synchronizing and timing elements presented on a web page. Interesting. I'm not actually familiar with this. Interesting. This lets you on a browser level keep animations in sync. This is something that's been missing for a long, long time. We've needed this forever. It's actually one of the reasons mobile is so much better in experience than desktop and web, because mobile apps have proper animation layers with prioritization and a lot of native stuff to help with that. Whereas the web, you just got to have JavaScript, make sure the right CSS is in the right place at the right time. And when an element needs to go away, that you can animate it before it goes away. Little things like removing an element from the DOM, there's no built-in way to animate that. And I'm pumped to see a browser level animation API trying to address that. And now WebRTC. I'm just going to click that and y'all will know how I feel. If you want me to do a longer video about the state of video on the web, more than happy to. Just not something I want to hijack this whole video for. But yeah, WebRTC is really important. It is not really fun. Web Speech API. This is one I have not used, but I'm really happy it exists. If I understand correctly, Web Speech is making it easier to have elements speak for people who are, for any of many reasons, unable to read with their eyes on the browser, be it like visual impairments, be it technical restrictions, be it you have really bad ADHD and struggle to read when you could just be listening. Having speech primitives built into the browser is actually really, really cool. And I'm hyped to see where that goes. Oh, good old WebSockets. I'll say I'd use them again. WebSockets are really important. It's the easiest way to send updated data to the browser that isn't just polling on the browser. They're not the easiest thing to implement, and the current crop of providers for WebSockets are not great. So I am excited to see where WebSockets go, especially now that we have companies like PartyKit and LiveBlocks pushing so hard to really innovate the developer experience around WebSockets. But I haven't seen that much improvement since the good old Socket.io era. For those who don't know, Socket.io was the first like really good wrapper around WebSockets that worked even in browsers that didn't support WebSockets. And that was actually created by Guillermo Roche, who then went on to create Next.js and Start for Cell. So really, really important stuff. WebSockets are cool, but I hope that they can continue to improve. Page Visibility API. I want to make sure I'm remembering this correctly, but I'm almost positive I have used this. Yes. So this API lets you know when your browser's visibility has changed. So if you background or foreground your web app, or you have like other elements covering things up, it makes it way easier on the window level to see which window you are in and when you are or aren't focused. It's a really powerful way for like what we do at Ping to auto hide and stop decoding the video feeds in the browser when you switch tabs, so that we don't have to be decoding like 6 video feeds when you're in a video call with other people if you're not even looking at the app at that point. So really powerful stuff. I have played with this a bit. Very excited to see where it goes in the future. But yeah, I'm very excited for page visibility. The broadcast channel API is also a thing I've played a lot with for Ping. You might have already seen people using the broadcast channel API when they were doing the crazy stuff with multi-window showing like the same app, where they would like move the windows around and it would change how like things were laid out. So you could have like 3 windows showing somebody's face split up like a mosaic. Really cool API for passing context between different browser tabs and windows for your web app. Super powerful for like shared state. If you've been on SoundCloud and you saw how if you have 3 tabs open, it knows that you're playing in one tab and shows you what you're playing in the other tabs, and you can pause it between tabs and such. What I used it for Ping was having a pop-out control panel for the web app. So when you're in a call, if you want to mute your microphone or change audio devices or turn off your camera, you don't have to be in the same tab to do that. And I did that by making a custom Jodi atom that would watch the local storage and then pick up events when you modified the local storage so the other tabs could update accordingly. It's a really surprisingly easy API to work with, and it lets you share context between different windows of the same app, or even an iframe with the same origin. Super, super powerful stuff, and it's really fun to play with. So absolutely recommend it. Turns out I was a little wrong about the Web Speech API. It's primarily for speech synthesis as well as recognition. So it's a browser level implementation of speech both ways. So you can take text and have it speak it, and you can also have your browser and your web app using native browser APIs recognize speech too. I'm happy that speech is getting attention, but I hope accessibility speech doesn't get left behind in the process, because that's one of the most important places for this type of tech to be implemented. At the very least, you have less of an excuse to not have good support for screen readers on your app. Geolocation API. Y'all know what geolocation is. I'm happy that there's a browser standard for it, because now you'll get the little notifications like, do you want your browser to let you use your location? And you can just hit no. None of my browsers have location permissions. Cool that it exists. Happy it's browser level. Not something I'm interested in personally. And then the WebXR device API. I am very curious what specifically this entails. It's a group of standards which are used to support rendering 3D scenes to hardware designed for presenting virtual worlds, or for adding graphical imagery to the real world. I've seen a little bit of this. It's again like 3D web stuff. I know I have one old friend who built something with this a while back. So I know it's like not super new. I think WebXR stuff is going to get much more interesting once the Vision Pro drops. Even if it's not a popular device, it will make web VR and AR a much more enticing target. And I think that's when we'll see more and more development around WebXR stuff. And we'll start to see libraries building around these primitives to make it a really good experience. But for now, I can't check this because I haven't really played with it. I have been meaning to do a video about this for a long time. Let's find in my to-do videos. The state of date is a thing I've been planning for quite a while and just haven't done. If you're not already familiar with the temporal API, it's a browser standard for datetime, which we haven't really had in JavaScript before. Let's find some examples. The motivation for temporal C, fixing JavaScript date. I don't want to go too deep into this. If you want to hear about it, let me know so I can actually make the full video about datetime. But a quick TLDR, you have things like temporal.now, .instant, now zoned datetime. A lot of these like very helpful helpers. You got .now, plain date. Browser not having a concept of duration before was obnoxious because you couldn't really do anything with different dates. It would just give you back like a number sometimes. But the idea of like taking a duration and adding that to a date and getting a new date is something you either need a library for or we're going to do a lot of weird math for. And I'm very thankful we won't have to do as much of that in the future. But for now, temporal is not supported by quite enough things for me to confidently recommend it. But it is a really cool API and I'm excited to use it more in the future. Progressive web apps. Who here has built a progressive web app? I want to see ones in chat if you've built a progressive web app before. Surprising number. More than I expected, honestly. Let's see twos if you would do it again. -2. Yeah, -2 if you wouldn't. Seems about 50-50. The ability to install your website as an app isn't the best thing in the world, and I understand why we've had the pain points we have. Google pushed them way too hard. But somewhat recently, progressive web apps finally got support for push notifications on iOS, which is a huge change that makes them, in my opinion, significantly more compelling. So I think if there's ever been potential for progressive web apps, it's right now, because if the only reason you have an app is for push notifications, you don't need to make an app for that anymore. So hopefully we'll see more people taking them seriously, but I personally don't use any progressive web apps at this point in time. So I'm not the strongest proponent. Excited to see where they go. But I would say my experience overall has been negative. Might change in the future. Speaking of things that are overhyped, WebAssembly. I should probably do a whole WebAssembly video. Again, let me know in the comments if you think I should too. But at this point in time, I'd say it's relatively overhyped, specifically because people think WebAssembly is going to replace JavaScript in the code we use to write our UIs. That's not the goal of WASM. The goal of WASM is to take a lot of like heavy math type stuff and the types of number crunching and algorithmic problems that JavaScript isn't good for and offloading them, as well as taking languages that are not JavaScript and making them viable in the browser. Again, not for UI, but more importantly, for inputs and outputs. I think of it less like a new way to build user interfaces in your apps and more like a server running in the browser in whatever language you want that makes it really low latency to do heavy work. Stuff like Figma, for example, doing a bunch of compute to process images and graphics and then rendering that in the browser via the JavaScript layer. It's really good for those types of things. But I'm still very bearish on UI frameworks built on top of WASM and things like Rust. So that's why I'm iffy on WASM. But again, if you guys want a full video on it, let me know and I'll be sure to do that in the near future. Anyways, what are my main pain points regarding the JavaScript language? That's a great question. Say the first one's probably like browser support for fun new stuff. It always sucks to have something you really want that you just saw a new API for and it's just not in like Safari. Really painful. Since it's specifically JavaScript, I'd say it's not TypeScript. The ability to take my TypeScript code and drop it in the browser would be very nice. And that is a proposal that I'm hopeful to see move forward. But at this point in time, TypeScript has to be compiled to be run. And that's not the best thing for making an easy, portable developer experience for all web developers. What other JavaScript stuff has bit me recently? Difference in runtimes, browser, Edge, CF, Dino, Node, Bun, etc. I've been running into this more and more. Even just like doing Advent of Code a few days ago, I had a solution that was really slow. And rather than try and figure out how to make it faster, I decided to move to Bun. But I had to change how I was reading files and stuff like that, which was a little annoying to have to break out of the standard enough to work around the different runtimes, different expectations. So yeah, what are my main pain points regarding browser APIs? WebRTC is a mess. It's just device API, especially across browsers, and how you get video feeds in and out of it is absolute chaos. The matrix of which resolutions are and aren't supported by different browsers and which like codecs and such is horrifying. I could make a 2-hour long video of all the pain I've experienced with WebRTC in the browser. What other browser APIs have caused me pain? Thinking. Does CORS count? I'm going to pretend CORS counts and move on. Yeah, date is a good one too. Thank you, chat. Hopefully date gets better with temporal, but we got some work to do. Anyways, let's talk about what we're all here for, front-end frameworks. So React. Never heard of it. No idea what that is. Obviously, I would use React again. Vue. I feel bad hitting this, but this is my truth. My problem with Vue is not that it is bad. My problem with Vue is not that I can't recommend it. My problem with Vue is simply that it's not for me. I don't like single file components. I don't like being forced to structure my UI in that specific of a way. And I really like the React ecosystem. I don't have a reason to use Vue. I would love to revisit it once Vapor happens. I'm actually really excited about that. And I think that the Vue ecosystem and community are in an incredible state. It is the logical alternative to React. Like, these are the two you should be deciding between most of the time. I personally lean towards React. So that's just my truth. Speaking of my truth, Angular. While I am really hyped with the direction of Angular and the hard work the Angular team has been doing, writing it still feels like pulling my teeth out one at a time. I can't do it. It's not for me. If they manage to make functional components a thing and start moving out of the terrible class component land, I do see it getting much more compelling. But at this point in time, I'm not an Angular person. It's not for me. I'm happy that for those who are using it and for those giant code bases that are stuck on it, that the experience is getting much better. They deserve to have a good time developing, and nobody should have a miserable experience just because they picked the wrong framework 3 years ago. So very excited to see Angular improving as much as it is, but it's still very explicitly not for me. Preact. If you're not already familiar with Preact, it's a minimal alternative to React that's meant to be surprisingly compatible. So your code looks and often is just React code. I like Preact a lot. I owe it hugely for my own deepening of my understanding of the web, because you can set up Preact without any build tools and using things like HTML, inline it in the browser, and just have an HTML file with an inline script tag that's using React. And it helped me better understand the relationship between all these parts. So Preact is a learning tool. Absolutely incredible. Highly recommend. Preact is a quick way to have a React-like experience in an app without a build pipe. Awesome. Really like that. Preact is an alternative to React for building a big web application. Yeah, iffier on that. Svelte. I'm really happy with runes. Runes are an acknowledgement that the Svelte simplicity isn't a real solution to most hard problems. And that embracing of complexity and building primitives to help work around it is something that genuinely really excites me. So for me, this is an easy used and would use again. I'm excited for that future. Svelte's one of the most promising frameworks right now, and I'm very excited to see where it ends up over the next couple of years. Alpine. It's not for me. It's very similar to like HTMX, but more focused on the web dev JavaScript markup side. It's a way to make your UI update without having to write JavaScript directly. Instead, you put all your logic in your markup and in your HTML. It's not my favorite solution for that. I would just use HTMX personally, but I'm happy that there are people pushing to make this possible so that you don't have to write a bunch of crazy JavaScript just to update your website. So cool, it exists. Explicitly, loudly not for me. Lit. We talked about Lit in the framework tier list video, which is coming up pretty soon. Again, not for me. Lit is without question the best way to write web components. If you want to write a component one time and have that component usable in all sorts of web apps from here on to the future, or if you have like a blog and you want to have a custom element in your blog, this is the best way to do that. And I can't recommend anything else. That said, not for me. Very explicitly not for me, because I don't like web components. Building a whole application with them is not a pleasant time. But if you want to have a good experience building web components because you need them, it's the best way to do that for sure. Solid.js. If you're not already familiar, I actually gave Solid.js Framework of the Year in 2022. The amount of progress Solid made in 2022 was absolutely nuts. Think of it like Solid is the framework that learned the most from every other framework. It's created by Ryan Carniato, who is one of the biggest web dev nerds I've ever known. He cares so much about web technologies and making the experience of building web applications better. He also felt like we left signals behind when we moved out of like the knockout era and wanted to bring them back in a modern context. The result is a framework that feels a lot like writing React, but has so much power around those core primitives. I've enjoyed everything I've built with Solid. It's very easy to make a really performant web app. And the work they put into Solid Start, which is their Next.js alternative, makes it more and more compelling every day. Solid is without question the framework I'm most hyped about outside of the React ecosystem, and I'm excited to see where it goes. I will continue using Solid for random stuff all the time. And yeah, Keep working on it, Ryan. If any of y'all are looking for more deep, nerdy web stuff to watch, I'll put a link to Ryan Carniato's YouTube channel in the description. He's my favorite YouTuber doing dev stuff that I personally watch. His streams are nuts and very, very deep, nerdy, technical detail stuff, but highly recommend it. Oh, quick. I can't honestly say I've used it enough to check one of the first two, so I'm going to check heard of it and would like to learn. I want to use Quick a bit more because I don't know enough about the DX. Whenever I look into Quick, whenever I talk about Quick, whenever I see others showing off and talking about Quick, the issue with Quick is they're so focused on the potential technical wins that I feel like we lose the conversation about the developer experience. Quick solving problems that I don't think are too big of a deal, and in its solutions to those has made it so I have to think about more as a developer. That all said, man, I am excited to see where it goes. It's cool having more technologies pushing web standards. I just want to have good developer experience too. And I don't think that the amount of wins Quick brings is enough to throw away existing ecosystems. And I'm excited to see where things go over time. Stencil, a web component compiler for building fast, reusable UI components in a static site-generated progressive web app. Stencil's explicitly not for me. It's a web component compiler. Weird experience, not for me. Feel free to look into it if you're interested in the idea of compiling out like other frameworks to make a web component, but both its inputs and its outputs aren't interesting to me. Not for me. Look at that. Look what made it in. Just not sure if we would see this here. I have a bit of a confession to make, guys. I know I'm a big proponent of HTMX, and I know that I talk about it a lot and how important it is. Never actually used HTMX. The reason I like HTMX isn't because I see myself using it heavily. It's actually the opposite. It's because I don't see myself using it. I like HTMX because it enables people who don't want to use React or modern web dev tools and technologies to build good experiences without leaving their language in their templating systems. You shouldn't have to use something like React to build basic interactions in your application. The browser doesn't support it. Like there's no way with browser standards without JavaScript, to be clear, to have a button that when you click it, it shows a loading state and then it shows a done state. There's no way to post a form without changing the route that you're on. All these behaviors are because of how the browser works without JavaScript. And the goal of HTMX is to let you go a little bit further without having to write that JS yourself. I think this is important because it raises the bar for when something like React is necessary, and it keeps people who don't want to use React from having to use it for quite as long. And the more important part there is once they do cross that line and they have enough interactions that something like React makes sense, they'll embrace it much more and get more of a win from it. I'm excited about HTMX and how it impacts the entire ecosystem. And honestly, I do hope I get to learn it a bit more in the future. Other options. I'm a little surprised Astra didn't make it in, but it makes sense. Ready for a real spicy take? HTMX is a front-end framework. Astra is a back-end framework. Astra runs on the server, not the client. Astra was front-end devs making a back-end framework, and HTMX is back-end devs making a front-end framework. And I think the contrast there is actually really interesting. Apparently, Astra's on the next page, which makes sense, so we'll do that there. How happy am I with the current state of front-end frameworks? I'm feeling great. The state of these tools is incredible. What pain points have I encountered using front-end frameworks? Web components, bundlers, bundle size, getting flamed on Twitter. I think that's a pretty good summary of the pain points I've encountered. It's obviously more, but anyways. Let's talk about meta frameworks, everyone's favorite topic. Next.js, what's that? Obviously, I would use Next again. Right now, more than ever, I'm so happy with server components, and I'm excited for other frameworks to have support for them. But honestly, I can't imagine building modern web apps without server components at this point. Even just hacking out a quick thing. Like 2 days ago, I was working on an app that takes an old blog with SoundCloud links and tries to parse out the SoundCloud links and then download them locally. Being able to write all of that with server components so that I can quickly write actions, just run it on my machine, have a web app where I click buttons and it runs commands is so powerful. Having your backend and your front end have that strong of a relationship is incredible. And I've been very happy with my experience using it. That said, Nuxt has worked hard to make one of the best full stack experiences of any framework and application development experience. It's nuts how much you can do with Nuxt. They've built incredible tools, everything from their custom fetch wrapper for type safe fetching from the server to their full stack plugin experience to Vue use, and just the state of the Nuxt and Vue ecosystem is better than ever. And the hard work the Nuxt team has put in is incredible. And I do really need to sit down and play with it more because Nuxt is so good that it makes me consider using Vue. Gatsby, never again. Remix, I am going to say would use again because I'm excited for its future. In its current state, I do not see myself using Remix. I don't like the way loaders and actions work. I don't think the route's the right place to define all of your server-side behaviors. I think the ability to define those behaviors in components is powerful enough that I don't ever want to go back to traditional route data loading, but I'm excited to see where they end up going with it, especially once they get server components working. Not into route level data loading. The potential performance wins and the state of the waterfalling, it matters, but it doesn't matter that much. Once you're waterfalling on the server, it's much less big of a deal than it is on the client. I actually already have a video where I talk about this, my moving off the edge video, which, yeah, if you want to hear more about this stuff, feel free to do that. And also make sure you check out Ryan Carniato's stream because he very much disagrees with me on this. There's a lot of people who have worked hard to battle and beat the hell that is waterfalling. That said, once you move the waterfalls to the server, they matter exponentially less. So I don't care as much. And I think that the DX loss of route level data loading is great enough that you should try to avoid it if you can. Anyways, Astro. I love Astro. I've never had so much fun quickly hacking out a static web app and being able to quickly embed things like React in it. The Astro team is working really hard to make it more powerful than ever, and I'm super excited for the future. 11T, not for me. 11T was similar to Astro. It was trying to make a really performant static site builder. So you could write a little bit of JavaScript, a little bit of markup, some markdown or whatever you want, and generate decent static web apps out of that. Happy it exists, not for me. Paved the way for a lot of cool new things to happen in the future, though. SvelteKit. There are so many good decisions in SvelteKit that I'm really hyped about. I still don't love the amount of code gen necessary to get TypeScript working properly, but that's my biggest complaint with it. Almost everything else is a really good design decision. I think they did a great job of separating up backend versus front end. I think their file-based routing is honestly a decent bit better than Next's. I really like their syntax. It's simple, but the little plus at the front of a file route so that you have it at the top of your file tree in VS Code. These little touches make the developer experience around SvelteKit one of the best I have had, even if I don't love single file components in the Svelte markup syntax. So SvelteKit's in a really good state to the point where I could see myself using Svelte as a result. So yeah, SvelteKit and Nuxt are both in incredible places. Docusaurus. Docusaurus doesn't get enough love. I personally am using Nextra right now, but all of the work I did in Docusaurus was pretty solid. It was a good experience overall, and the performance of the things I made in Docusaurus blew me away. Just navigating a Docusaurus site, because it is a single page app, the way it does client-side routing feels really fast. And once you've loaded the first page in a Docusaurus site, the experience navigating around it is just incredible. So the result is great. The input and developer experience, pretty damn good too. Docusaurus deserves more love. Shout out to the team working on that. Solid Start. Solid Start has had a crazy journey. It started as its own custom set of plugins built around Vite in order to make server-side Vite possible. Then they jumped on top of Astro and built heavily around Astro for a new version. Then went off and developed Bling, which was a way to do server-side data stuff, be it a mutation or data fetch, with a good experience taking that server code and mounting it and using it in your clients just by writing server $sign. Really powerful stuff. I was hyped with the proposals. They blew my mind back when they first started. But now a lot of other tools and ecosystems have started catching up. And yeah, Solid Start had the first real competition to tRPC that I saw. It was one of the first frameworks to take seriously this complex relationship between the server side and the client side and give you the tools you need to build around that as a developer. So I absolutely love Solid Start and I'm very excited to see where it goes. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, it's currently being rebuilt around the new, I believe it's called Nitro by the Vite crew, where they're making a generic set of tools around Vite for server-side rendered frameworks like Astro, like Solid Start, like Nuxt, so that we can all have one shared starting point and not have to rebuild all the server-side stuff and all the client-side stuff and all the bundle splitting. So that's really exciting, and I'm super hyped to see where Solid Start goes. Dino Fresh, explicitly not for me. I'm happy it exists. If you're not already familiar with Fresh, think of it almost like the remix of Dino, built on top of Preact instead of React. It's very minimal. It's not moving particularly fast, and the DX wasn't anywhere near good enough for me. I'm hopeful that I'm wrong in the future, but at this point in time, I'm not super impressed with Fresh. Other options, meh. Overall, I'm very happy with the state of things with meta frameworks. Things have moved really far, really fast. And this year in particular, I feel like we saw a lot of people trying to catch up because Next did something different enough that there was a perceived gap for people to fill. And everyone tried to really push their full stack framework forward during that window. And I think the result is incredible, genuinely. Like the amount that all of the tools for all of the major frameworks improved over the last year is insane. And I can confidently say almost any option in that list will be a good experience for you now, significantly better than the one you would have had last year. And that's a dope, exciting trend. What are the main pain points? Sharing code between backend and front end, runtime discrepancies, hydration errors, Next and dates, building tools that work in greater than one of these frameworks. Yeah, this one in particular, I've had a lot of pain like with upload thing, for example. Building upload thing in a way where it's a good experience for people in Nuxt and in Next and in SvelteKit. Oh boy, the next section. My favorite, testing. Tools for testing your code. Jest, I would very much like to never use again. Jest was built before Node was really a standard, and it invented a lot of things in order to replicate enough of the browser. And the result's a bit of a mess. I don't have a good time with it. And it feels like every testing tool since has had to reinvent a lot of Jest just to continue supporting things that were written around it. And the result's a mess. The result's an absolute mess. Mocha. If I recall, Mocha's like pretty behind. It came out around the same time as Jest originally and just slowly petered off. I could be wrong on that, but I just haven't heard of many people pushing Mocha at all. It's actually older than Jest. Yeah, that checks out. Meh. Storybook. I will never again use Storybook. It is in a rough state. It's so slow. It's so bloated. It's full of absurd amounts of legacy code. I've just never had a good experience with Storybook, and it's continuing to get worse. They explicitly don't support Next, and I doubt they'll ever support server components. It's so heavy. It's so slow. It's encouraging developers to build their applications wrong. They build them around their components instead of around their user experiences. Storybook's rough. Don't touch it. If you really need an alternative, add a private route to your application that only runs in dev and throw all your components in that. But it just does not work. Cypress. I'm somewhere between these. I guess just because Puppeteer exists, I'm not going to use Cypress directly. Cypress is one of the first things to standardize running a fake mini browser to throw your app in for end-to-end tests. But with Puppeteer and now Playwright where they're at, things are much better. So honestly, I would say neither Cypress nor Puppeteer are things I would use right now when Playwright's gotten to the point where it's at. So yeah, both Puppeteer and Cypress aren't necessarily my things anymore. Puppeteer, I remember when this came out and just having my mind blown that you could actually run Chrome via the CLI and test things with it. Very powerful, very useful, just not something I want to have to use and set up properly when there are now better tools for it, like Playwright. Anyways, testing library. Testing library is in a really good state overall. The absolute chaos we were going through with Jest and Enzyme was the way that we would test React components for a long time within the Jest ecosystem. And it was a mess. It was super unstable. It had weird edge cases you would hit all the time that only exist in the testing environment and not in the greater actual code you're writing. Miserable experience. And Kent Dodds was not happy with it, especially when he was teaching testing around React. And he started working on testing library just as a better React testing solution. And it eventually became the default standard, and more frameworks started adding support to it. And now testing library is kind of the go-to, and Enzyme's effectively dead. No one recommends Enzyme anymore. And for that alone, testing library is an incredible contribution to the web ecosystem. Anyways, Playwright, the only not miserable way to automate Chromium tests. Also Firefox, WebKit, and all those other things too. But yeah, Playwright's the best experience I have had trying to do end-to-end testing. It's in a very good state. That's what I would recommend right now if you can use it. The rest is in an iffy spot. WebDriver IO. Not familiar with this one. Get by text is an interesting thing to have a helper for. Yeah, I don't love this syntax. Yeah, looks interesting. Probably not for me. Maybe I'll look into it in the future. Probably, I'm going to check this and be honest. I'm not looking for new testing tools. People will bring me the really good ones if they're good. And somebody would have pushed this on me by now if it was really, really revolutionary. But not for me at this point in time. VTest is great. It was created within the Vite ecosystem in order to make testing faster and less miserable. And it's really, really fast, significantly faster. It's a little more standard, although it is built to try and be a one-to-one Jest replacement. So it still has a lot of Jest-isms. That said, VTest is the most compelling unit testing framework I've seen in the JavaScript ecosystem. This and the bun testing are probably the two directions I would legitimately consider. Everything else feels like a bit of a mess. Anyways, Selenium. Not interested. Another one of those browser testing tools. They didn't even put a description for it. That's how you know it's meh. Test Cafe. Never heard of it and I don't really care. Mock service workers. Yes. Mock service workers are dope. Mock service workers, industry standard API mocking for JavaScript. It makes it very easy to mock any package, any layer, any fresh call, anything. Really, really powerful way to mock stuff in your developer experience, both for testing and for development work, just making things run. They have any good examples? Yeah, control the network. Makes it easy to browser level or test level hijack HTTP and change what responses you get from different requests. It's trivial to mock things at an HTTP level in the browser using mock service worker. Super, super powerful stuff. Makes browser testing and mocking in dev way better than it's ever been. Really pumped with the work that's going on in the mock service worker world. Highly recommend it. Other options. Bun. The bun testing stuff's really compelling. Excited to see where that goes. I'm going to say neutral because I don't give a shit. Y'all know that about me. Testing's a thing I do when I have to, not a thing I default to. And the tools are better than they were, so I'm happy in that sense, but meh. Pain points have I encountered when using testing tools. A lot of these aren't the fault of the tools, but testing things TS already checks. I feel like we've gotten better as an ecosystem about that. I see way fewer useless tests, but there are still a decent number. The compatibility and runtime differences between test env and actual env, import mocking hell, the never-ending pile of jest isms, people still using enzyme. I could go off for a while, but this is enough for me to feel good. Switching to the next section. Let's not talk about testing for a bit, guys. I'm tired. Mobile and desktop. Time to be the Electron defender again. I've always been amused that the people who hate on Electron the most are often Linux users. Because if Electron didn't exist, there would be no apps on Linux. Like, Electron made it possible to make good multi-platform experiences as a web developer and have access to things that are on a native level to your operating system. It's so powerful what Electron has enabled, and the number of companies, the number of products, the number of solutions that exist on platforms outside of just the browser in Windows is largely because of Electron being as good as it is. Everything from VS Code to Slack to Discord to Spotify. There's a reason everything's using Electron. It's because it's a great way to build applications. It's not as fast as building native, but you can develop way faster. And if you do have problems with things like performance, you can address those things when you have them. But the likelihood you even get to the point where you have enough users that these problems matter has gone up significantly because of Electron. If you were building things not with Electron and using native technologies instead, it's going to take so much longer to even make it work that the likelihood you find users who find problems that you can then fix is so much lower. So yeah. Electron gets a lot of hate because people load too much JavaScript into it and write bad applications. That's not Electron's fault. Electron's a great way to write JavaScript that makes good user experiences. Anyways, React Native. Y'all know how I feel about React Native, even just for the checklist of features that it enables that other things don't, like proper hot module reloading and like over-the-air updates without having to go through the App Store. For that alone, it's basically impossible to justify other technologies that don't support it. So obviously React Native is something I hugely support and recommend. It's a good technology. Rethink it if you are against it. Like, you need reasons other than it's too slow, because there's a lot of really performant React Native apps. It's awesome what it has enabled. Check it out if you haven't already, especially with the State of Expo and things. React Native's in a really good spot. Native apps. Swift UI is fun, so I'll check this. The state of native tools is slowly improving, but when you compare it to the speed the web improves, it's almost like a meme, because for all of these, there's only one place where things are actually getting better. It's sad that like in the web, we have 15 different frameworks constantly pushing the browser standards forward and pushing what you can do with these frameworks forward. To have something like React and server components make the whole ecosystem of the web care more about the server client and the relationship between them. There aren't really equivalents of that in mobile land, because if you're on Android and you're writing native, you are using Kotlin and Java. If you're on iOS, you are using Objective-C or Swift. That means that there is less innovation fundamentally, and that's sad. That all said, Swift and Swift UI are doing some really cool things, and they've learned a lot of lessons from React. It's still not in the best state. Like almost every major version, they deprecate huge things because they want to rethink the API. Like it's beta and it feels beta, but it is fun. And there is a difference in native apps. They can be slightly better and slightly more performant, but they are much more work to get right. And the state of the tooling just isn't there. And goddamn, the last day I open Xcode is still way too far away. I hate Xcode and Android Studio so goddamn much. You have no idea. Anyways, Cordova, not for me. Ionic I've defended in the past. From what I've heard recently, it's not in as good of a state as I seemed to believe prior. Think of Ionic as like progressive web apps ++, where it lets you wrap a PWA in a native binary that you can ship to the App Store and install and have access to some native stuff like the native camera, the native notification system, those types of things. Not for me. Very much not for me. With the state of React Native, that's the direction I'd go in. But supposedly, if you have like a Vue app that you really want to run on mobile, Ionic's one of the best ways to do that. Capacitors, again, very similar to Ionic. I haven't looked into it too much, and I probably should more in the future. Now, apparently Ionic works with Capacitor now, so that's cool to hear. And I've heard good stuff with specifically Svelte and Capacitor for hacking out a mobile app, but I don't know enough to say any further, and I don't care enough to look into it if I'm honest. NWJS. Call out all node modules directly from the DOM or a web worker and enable a new way of writing applications with all web technologies. Never heard of it. I'll look into that in the future. Sounds interesting. Expo. Mentioned them a bit earlier. Expo, think of like Expo to React Native the way you would think of Vercel to React. They built a lot of the tooling around it, a lot of the infrastructure and all the things you need to have a good time writing React Native. With Expo, you can do crazy stuff, like not even need Xcode on your machine. You can init an Expo app, scan a QR code to run it on your phone, and then when you want to ship it to the App Store, you just run a command in your CLI, and then Expo's build servers pick it up and run it through their proprietary Macs on their weird infra somewhere else, just to build the app and ship it for you. You don't even need a Mac in order to ship an iPhone app anymore because of Expo. It's in a really good state. Highly recommend if you want to build a mobile app that you do it through the Expo ecosystem. Quasar. I hate this promise enough to say I am not interested and will not look into that in the future. Tory. Oh, Tory. People just noticed in chat that I actually have Tory as a banned word because every time somebody brings this up, it makes me want to rip my teeth out one at a time. It's not that Tory is bad. It's that it's incredibly overrated. And people seem to think just by swapping out Electron with Tory, everything magically gets better. That's not how this works. Most of the reasons I use Electron, things like accessing your file system, it does terribly because you have to write Rust for it. So cool it exists. I'm happy that the Rust people and the browser people agree for long enough to make something. But for some reason, whenever people bring it up around me, they do it in the most annoying possible way. Like, the most possible annoying imaginable way. So not something I would go back to personally. NativeScript. NativeScript empowers you to access native APIs from JavaScript directly. Angular, Vue, Svelte, React, and all that. I've heard about it. I feel like I played with it a while ago and it just wasn't in that good of a state. I don't think people understand the amount of effort that goes into React Native and getting that working. Building those bindings in a framework specific way is hard enough. Building them in a generic way feels impossible. Building them in a generic way without meta, powering it and hiring a 40+ person team to do it actually feels impossible. I've just not seen enough compelling examples of people using NativeScript to build cool stuff, whereas I use React Native apps every day. So this is something I could be wrong about, but I want to see good NativeScript apps before I take it more seriously, personally. Other options, meh, generally happy. Expo has made it significantly better to build mobile applications, which is one of the big missing pieces. The Electron ecosystem is still a bit of a mess, and I've heard people using my crazy mono repo around Electron I built like 2 years ago and haven't touched since because there isn't really a good starting point for Electron right now. That said, you can build really awesome stuff with a lot of the things listed here. I wish there was more innovation in the space, but it's more than good enough right now. Overall, happy and excited to see the progress continue. What are the pain points I've experienced? Native developers getting mad at me for using JS. Say that's the biggest one. Yeah, that's all I need to say. Build tools. Oh, Webpack. I really hope I never have to write a Webpack config again. For that reason, I'm going to check this. Obviously, Webpack is still used in Next, but I avoid it to the best of my ability. I'm not writing much Webpack-specific code nowadays. And as TurboPack gets further along, as RSPack becomes a more usable standard, I'm very excited for Webpack to finally be sunset. Parcel. I don't know what to check here, because I've never used Parcel directly. I guess it's not really used by other things I use. Like Parcel's really cool. It's always been like the slight outsider pushing standards constantly, and I'm happy it exists. I'd like to use it at some point. I know the team works really hard. I know Devin is in particular really talented and smart, and I want to play with what he's built. But there's so many other things in the ecosystems I use that I haven't had a reason to really play with Parcel. Rollup, I've absolutely used. Not necessarily directly, but I primarily use Rollup through Vite because Rollup is the production pipe in Vite. And right now in Vite, you use ESBuild for dev and then Rollup for prod. Their goal long-term is to rewrite Rollup in Rust. I think it's named Rolled Down, and then use that for both dev and prod. So yeah, in a good spot. Excited to see where it goes. The good old TSC CLI. I use it for type checking, but I would never use it for build anymore. We got way too many better tools for that. SWC is a super fast compiler written in Rust, producing widely supported JavaScript from modern standards in TypeScript. I'm using SWC. Most of us are using it in Next nowadays. So yeah, SWC is great. It's a solid alternative to ESBuild written in Rust. Good old ESBuild. Also, absolutely love it. It's got a pretty rough bus factor in terms of the fact that like Evan Wallace is the only person really contributing to ESBuild, but rewriting the JavaScript bundling ecosystem in Golang was a bold thing to do alone. He's done a surprisingly good job. The whole renaissance of build tools largely started with ESBuild, and Evan deserves a lot of credit for pushing that forward. And then another Evan Yu, for taking what happened with ESBuild and making it more useful by adding that into Vite. Really good state. Speaking of Evans and ESBuild, so I just mentioned, Vite uses ESBuild for its dev mode. And Evan Yu, the creator of Vue, is the creator of Vite. Vite's in a great state. I highly recommend it. There are a couple weird Vite-isms that I don't love that don't traditionally follow browser standards, and it can get a little rough when you go the unbundled path and have too many dependencies and you're loading like 3,000 JavaScript files in dev mode. But it's still a really good thing overall. And like Vite's the way I go when I'm building a single page app to this day. I'm actually working on yet another set of projects built around Vite. It's by far the best way to build a single page app. And when I say build, I literally mean take your JavaScript files and build them into an output. But it's not perfect. And I'm excited to see the ecosystem continue catching up. TurboPack. I feel like I have to check this because every time I've tried to run TurboPack, it didn't run. There's always some weird thing that TurboPack doesn't support or causes some random package to break. So I've personally yet to actually run TurboPack on a real code base. I'm excited for the support to get a little further. It's getting very, very close. But turns out rewriting the world in Rust isn't that easy. And I think the Vercel teams learned some very important lessons through their efforts on TurboPack. TSUp is fucking awesome. Quick TLDR on TSUp is you point it at some TypeScript without a config, and it spits things out for you that work. It's really nice. Anything that's supported in Node natively, it supports. You can also spit out things like a d.ts file, and it will run the right TSC commands to produce that for you. But when you're just writing TypeScript, you want to turn it into JavaScript, it does a great job of converting that to just using ESBuild under the hood. A lot of ways you can think of TSUp as similar to what Vite does for web apps. TSUp is doing largely for libraries. It makes it very easy to take a bunch of TypeScript and JavaScript code and output something usable in other applications. This is what we use for all the packages we're building at Ping, be it upload thing, be it webhook thing. This is an essential package for the stuff that we build. And the amount of work Egoist put in to make it possible is huge. Highly recommend TSUp if you're building libraries. You probably already know about it if you're building libraries. So yeah, it's a phenomenal tool. I can't actually imagine doing what I do without it. So easy, would use again. Biome. Biome is very exciting. I think Biome is more exciting to me as a linter and like developer experience tool than it is as an alternative builder. Biome originally started as Roam, which was a well-funded open source VC startup that's goal was to rethink the whole web tooling ecosystem. And while it did a great job overall in terms of proving it was possible, it just went through way too much developer turmoil and like people joining and leaving, crazy drama, and eventually slowly unwinding. And one of the lead contributors to Roam has since forked and created Biome to try and push it a little further forward. We'll see where it goes. The linting's in a really good state. I could see Biome replacing Prettier even within the next year, but the rest is going to be a rough ride. We'll see where it ends up. I wouldn't have put this in build tools for that reason. We'll see where it goes. Other options. I feel like we covered everything I care about here. Oh, RSPack should absolutely have been in this. RSPack is super promising. It's yet another Webpack Rust rewrite, but it's much more focused on like the world of module federation. I guess this is the best I can put it. Like the world of modules being compiled elsewhere and then blindly loaded into your new app and expecting this all to behave properly for giant, like huge code bases with lots of developers. RSPack's really promising in those scenarios. I know it's already being used at places like Discord and always forget ByteDance. Yes. It's already being used at places like Discord and ByteDance, the creators of TikTok, in order to make those giant code bases more manageable. And I've seen some crazy numbers. If you want to hear more about RSPack, let me know and maybe I'll make a video in the near future. How happy am I with the current state of build tools? Oh, we also forgot Bun. Bun's a build tool too. So I'll put that in there as well. So how happy am I overall? Pretty happy. We can make some improvement. Like the fact that almost none of these tools properly support Next.js at this point in time is sad. TurboPack's getting close, but we're all stuck in Webpack land for a little bit longer. And I'm very hopeful that 2024 is the year we can finally leave Webpack behind. What pain points have I encountered? Webpack, Next.js support. People thinking they can just rewrite it in Rust. Those are some good pain points. Let's move on to monorepo tools. Never heard of Rush. Let me know if I'm missing something with Rush, chat, but I've never heard of it, which is a scary sign. Turborepo, I'll absolutely use again. Turborepo is in a really, really good state, and as minimal as it is, really powerful. I've enjoyed it a lot. It's how we build all of our mono repos. If you want some good examples of using Turbo, we have Create T3 Turbo, which is largely run by Julius, and then he has Acme Corp, which is entirely his thing, which we rely on these heavily. Also, take a look at the Upload Thing repo, which does a lot of cool stuff with Turbo. Yarn workspaces. At the time, very good and important, especially when we were using it alongside Lerna. Lerna is the one I'm thinking of. Lerna plus Yarn workspaces was the move for a long time. We've moved past that since, but for a while, that was the way we did things. And we got Yalk, also not familiar. Speaking of Lerna, here it is. Lerna was essential at the time, but we have made so much improvement since that I think Microsoft made the right call saying, hey, we're not supporting this anymore. And then having that taken over by NX to do their best to make it usable so people have a real migration path was very good of them to do. It was the first. It's far from the best. NPM workspaces never once have behaved how I expect them to. PNPM has been efficient and really good overall. PNPM plus Turbo Repo has been great overall. That said, I feel like I'm duplicating a lot of stuff. Like one of those tools should be able to get more info from the other. I shouldn't have to duplicate like workspace info where packages are, stuff like that. I've had a lot of weird issues where I didn't put something in the right place, but I put it in the other one, and now nothing works and the error messages suck. But overall, PNPM plus Turbo, I still think's the move. NX, I absolutely need to do more with. I've been talking with the team quite a bit. NX is in a really good state overall. It almost feels like NX is the next and Turbo is the next, where NX is trying to build all the plugins, all the ecosystem tools, all the everything you would ever need themselves. And as a result, it's the go-to in the Angular world. I just don't see many people in the React world using it yet because Turbo's in a nice, powerful, minimal state. NX is far from minimal, but it is really powerful. And it is something I've meant to look into a bit more. So let me know in the comments if you think I should play with NX a bit. Other options. I feel like I covered everything I planned to here. I'm trying to think of other important monorepo tools. Bun workspaces. I can throw that in. No matches. I guess I'll just put bun. How happy am I with the current state of monorepo tools? I'll say neutral. I should say happy. It's way better than it was last year. Like we're making a lot of progress, but things like package version management and like order of events for like TypeScript definitions and shit is still rough. What are the pain points I've encountered? The one I was just hinting at a bit was the experience with packages that depend on each other for type signatures and having a good developer experience around that. Dependencies in between packages. The problem with this is I'll often need the types to come out of a build step. So if I have like a shared core package and it has to be built before the types work in the others, that now has to block, not just in build, but in dev too. And getting the order of events for all these things proper is obnoxious. And I have had a hell of a time trying to make a good experience with that. What other things? Duplicating state between tools. As I was talking about earlier, having the hell of orchestration of your state of like which packages matter, where are they, how do they get interpreted, where you have to write the same stuff both in PNPM and in Turbo. It's pretty rough. It's getting better though. And then generally versions. Version management in monorepos is miserable. It just is. Let's talk about other tools. Which libraries do I regularly use? I haven't touched Immer in so long. Also haven't touched Lodash or Underscore in a very long time. If you're not familiar with Immer, it's focused on immutability in JavaScript, make it easier to have things that don't change without cloning them, and good tools to update like a deeply nested key inside of an object. TypeScript's made a lot of this stuff better, but if you really want true immutability in your apps, Immer is still the way to do it. If I recall, it was created by the same person as MobX in order to make the MobX developer experience better. Yeah, Lodash and Underscore, not things I use anymore. Really important for pushing web standards before we were actually getting web standard improvements regularly. Ramda, never heard of, probably not my thing. jQuery, who doesn't want to use more jQuery? RxJS, never again. Never again. RxJS was one of the first observable solutions in JavaScript, and as important and powerful as it was to have good observables in JS, it was also an absolutely miserable experience. And I'm very thankful that we're not dealing with that and the weird bugs, the weird memory errors, and all the types of chaos I saw when we were deep in observable land with RxJS. God. Standard lib. I'm curious. Weird that the second thing it calls out is data viz. This meant to be a standard set of like math stuff, not something I care about. MATLAB, great. Yeah, no, not for me at all. Zod, I absolutely love. Zod is the best way to do validation in the browser and in your server in JavaScript right now. It's the first validation tool that really focused on the TypeScript experience and having good type definitions on both sides. Absolutely love Zod. Highly recommend it. Even if it's not the fastest solution, it is still one of the best. What's Core.js? I know this. Oh yeah, this is the polyfill for everything, right? I've definitely used it. I hope I never have to use it again. I hope browser standards get to the point where I don't need it, but it's like the go-to polyfill for everything. Partytown. Partytown's really cool. If you're not already familiar, Partytown's by the Quick guys. The goal of Partytown is to make it so you can take things that use too much JavaScript, like CPU cycles, and throw them into service workers instead of having them actually run in the same JavaScript runtime in like thread as your UI stuff. So like if you have Google Analytics and you don't want that taking up a ton of your JavaScript compute cycles, Partytown is you throw that out of your current runtime and into a service worker and just send messages back and forth. It's not great for things that have a lot of those back and forth messages, but it's great for things that get a message, do way too much work, and then maybe send a response. Really happy that Partytown offloads things from that main thread and makes the experience for your users significantly better. Really cool project. Happy it's gotten the interest and adoption it has. Mitosis. I remember this. Oh yeah, this is the, again, Builder.io stuff. So again, Mitosis, same team as Partytown and Quick. The goal of Mitosis is to let you write your front-end code once and then compile it out to everything from Vue to Solid to React, Svelte. whatever else. It's a way to write your code once and output code for lots of different frameworks. It's almost like the inverse of web components in that way. Like, what if instead of building a component that like one set of code can run in any framework, it's this one set of code can compile to any framework. Really interesting. I haven't seen many people using it, but it's cool that it exists, and I'm excited to see what people do with it. So yeah, I'd say this is something I'm going to look into more in the future, but not something that I use personally. Moment. Moment was the standard for date time for a long, long time and no longer is. I honestly feel like Moment gets more shit than it deserves because it was a bit big and a bit slow, but it still pushed our ability to interact with dates in the browser significantly. Thankfully, it has a really good spiritual successor with Day.js, which I absolutely love. Data.finesse is also in a pretty good state overall. It's not my go-to. I know Day.js is more JavaScript and isn't as standard, but Day.js works with my brain better and does a lot of the random like stuff like durations that I have to do a little bit better. So I lean towards Day.js, but both of these libraries are phenomenal and good options to go with. Moment is largely deprecated and not maintained anymore, so I would avoid it. What's Luxon? Oh, is Luxon just like a more one-to-one Moment replacement? Cool. Happy it exists. Day.js is in a great state. I'm just going to keep using Day.js. And then Yup. Think of Yup similar to Zod, but before Zod and before TypeScript. So Yup's ability to handle type definitions just isn't as good. And I can't think of a reason to use Yup instead of Zod at this point in time. So not something I'd recommend at the moment. Graphics and animation. Oh boy. React Spring is phenomenal. And I'm sad people don't give it the love it deserves. React Spring is dope. Let's find a good example. The magic of React Spring is that it's very primitive. It doesn't give you the traditional like use slide in type primitives that you would not have to write a lot of code for. Its goal is to give you the ability to animate an element without that animation having to run on the same thread as your React code. So if you have this div and you want it to shift to the right, you could put that in use state and then on every frame update where it's located. But now your React component has to re-render on every single frame, which sucks. React Spring creates like a ref binding effectively, attaching this animated div to this hook that runs separately from React and allows for the DOM to update where that element is located without having to rerun your React component to do that. And its primitives are very, very, very powerful. So here it's from x0 to x100. Now it can apply the style. You just dump it to the animated div and it does what you'd expect it to. It's really powerful in that way. And I am blown away with the stuff I've seen with React Spring. That said, still not the go-to for a lot of people because it is so primitive and you have to write so much of the stuff yourself. But that's because it's by the Pointmanders guys, the same people who make React 3 Fiber, the same people who make Zustand and Jodi. They wanted to make an animation solution that was performant enough to run in things like React 3 Fiber so you could use this for 3D animation as well. Results incredible. React Spring is one of the best animation libraries, I would argue, ever, but it is more work than the alternatives, which is why it doesn't get as much love. The thing that does get a lot of love is Framer Motion. Framer is so important for how it changed the way we animate on the web. Framer Motion was originally announced 2 days after hooks were announced, because when the creators of Framer saw hooks, they were like, oh my God, this is the best possible way for us to introduce animation primitives to React. And the result was incredible. Like this div, all of the animation properties exist on the div itself. You'll see the syntax motion.div similar to animation.div with Spring, but a lot of the like things you would want to do, like a rotate or a fly in or fly out when the component unrenders, those types of like common animation behaviors, they just have examples for all of that. What's variants? Variants are a declarative way to orchestrate complex animation through a component tree. By providing multiple components with a variant object with visual states in the same name, they can all be animated in sync by the switch of a single animate prop. That's really cool. You just switch from one of these to the other by switching like a prop that changes the Boolean, and then they all animate together at once. Really powerful stuff. Even just having like a drag primitive baked in where you can just make a ref constraint and then have a div that now can be dragged around. Those types of things are not easy to implement, and having a good set of primitives to do all of that for you in React is huge. Really, really pumped with what the Framer team has done. If you're already familiar with Framer, they've built a full, Figma alternative for building React applications with drag and drop and working with your designers and such. And it's in a really good state overall. I think Framer is dope and doesn't get quite enough love on that side, but their animation stuff, absolutely incredible, best in class. I would use it again. I'm sure a lot of y'all will as well. GreenSock. GreenSock is one of the most OG animation solutions. Wow, they redid the homepage again. GreenSock is not framework specific. GreenSock is the closest thing to an abstraction on the browser standards for doing really complex animations, like all the crazy stuff we just saw happen there. GSAP allows you to effortlessly animate anything JavaScript can touch. Yeah, it's really, really cool. The syntax is going to be a little rougher because it's not framework specific. It's been the standard for a while. I probably wouldn't reach for it because I work within frameworks. And as such, my focus is going to be on things like React Spring and Framer. That said, Three.js is incredible. I primarily use 3 through React 3 Fiber. Regardless, Three.js is the thing powering it. It's really powerful. If you're not already familiar, Three.js is the library for doing 3D WebGL stuff that almost everyone uses for their browser-based 3D experiences. WebGL is a rough primitive, and Three.js builds a lot of things on top. It's still very primitive, and a lot of the things that you'll be working with here are like animation keyframes or camera positioning or like GL buffer attributes. It's still very primitive, but having all of these like reusable JavaScript classes that handle a box geometry and let you apply a mesh to it and giving you the necessary pieces to assemble this stuff is huge. Again, you still need to know a little bit about like 3D rendering for this to work, but it's abstracted how much you need to know significantly and provided a set of reusable pieces that make it just way less painful to work with WebGL. I honestly can't imagine doing WebGL Canvas stuff without Three.js or something wrapping it. Theater.js, I've heard of this. Where have I heard of this? Theater.js is a new animation library. Interesting that it gives you like a UI for your sequencing and such. Very interesting. Clearly, there's a lot for me to learn with Theater. So if you're already using it, let me know in the comments if I should look into it more and why. Pop Motion, God, there's a lot of these. I'll just go through them all quick. Oh, this is the library that is used for Framer Motion. Really interesting. In that sense, I will use Pop Motion again because it's powering things I'm already using. What about Motion 1? Web animations for everyone. Is this the one that was built by the guy who made Framer Motion originally? Because I know that person left and did their own thing. I think it's this. Yeah, Matt Perry. Motion 1's a really interesting new development, actually. Motion 1 was created by the creator of Framer, who, as I just mentioned, previously was building on top of Popover. The benefit of Motion 1 is that it's one of the first of these JavaScript libraries that's built on top of the web animation API instead of being built with a bunch of weird div transformations on the browser side. This means you don't have to include a ton of JavaScript and then run all of that just to update things on your browser, because the web animation API lets you do a lot of that much more performantly. It's also why the amount of code you load is so much less. Yeah, here it is. Size matters. Motion 1 versus Greenstock, which again, Greenstock was the most browser standard solution for a while. It was one of like the most performant, both in terms of bundle size and animation output solutions. And Motion 1 smokes it just by bundle size, because again, it's built on top of the browser standards. They don't have to reinvent all of these pieces themselves. Motion 1, I haven't used, but I really want to look into it. I kind of want to check this. Like, I know enough about it and I want them to get the point, because I want Motion 1 to be more popular, but I'll be honest and not check it. Anime.js, that's one I haven't touched for a long time. Anime.js was one of the OG JavaScript animation solutions. Beautiful website. They're doing GitHub sponsors early access for V4. That's interesting. They really need sponsors at the moment, it seems. I'm not sure about the current state of Anime.js because I haven't touched this ecosystem for a while, but it is something I used to use and it's fine. I'll just check it and not say what I use or not use again. Lottie and D3 being in here are interesting because neither of these are animation libraries in the traditional sense. Lottie is technically for animations. Lottie is rough because Lottie was originally built for you to take things out of After Effects and export them so you can use them on mobile applications. So if you made a fancy animation in After Effects and you wanted to have to be like your boot up screen on your iPhone app, Lottie was the way to do that. Eventually, they had to build it for web though, and the web package is a bit of a mess. It's bundle size. Yeah, 240 kilobytes minified. That's insane. Yeah, Lottie Web, 300 kilobytes minified. It's rough because it has to do so much shit. Lottie, as I was hinting at there, is massive, and implementing it properly is obnoxious. I have had nothing but bad experiences with Lottie, and I'm so thankful that Rive is catching on the way it is. If you're not already familiar with Rive, I've regularly cited this as the only Flutter app I don't hate, because this is what Flutter is good for, is complex animations and almost nothing else. An animation studio thinks similar to something like what you're used to with After Effects, but it lets you export usable little runtimes that you can embed in your app that are way smaller and more performant than Lottie ever has been. You can even make them interactive, which is dope too. People are making full games with the Rive renderer, which is really cool to see. Yeah, all these little animations are so much more performant than anything I've ever seen in the world of Lottie, and works on everything because it's its own custom UI layer. People are asking how big is it? The big difference is with it is that you're not embedding a runtime and then loading in Lottie files that are massive. It's all like one thing. You like build a little package for each of your animations, and those tend to be much smaller. So like this crazy animation, all of the assets and everything for it is 43 kilobytes. Are you kidding? That's insane. Huge fan of Rive. Really excited to see where they go. If you want me to talk more about those types of things, let me know, because I've been meaning to do a deep dive on it for a while. So I'm going to put Rive in here. And D3. D3 is how we make charts in JavaScript. Most of the new chart solutions are still just D3 wrappers. So I have to check it because I'm still using it, but I don't actually like using it. I like the wrappers enough, but yeah, D3 is a necessary evil. Oh boy. And from animations to backend frameworks, these are two opposite ends. It's crazy how jarring this transition is for me, going straight from like crazy animation stuff to this deep in backend. Express is fine. You guys know how I feel about Nest. I don't like Nest. If you need Nest, you need to use a better language for your backend. Like once things have gotten that complex, get out of JavaScript. Not digging it. Strappy, I haven't used ever. Yeah, it's a CRM. It's one of the earliest headless CRMs. From what I know, it's in a pretty good state. Still not really my type of thing. Now we're getting to things I like, though. Fastify. Fastify is dope. Fastify inspired me to do a video in the future of underrated JavaScript libraries, because Fastify deserves way more attention. It's by a lot of the original Express devs, and the goal was to make Express suck less. How can we take like the good syntactical wins of Express and make them way more performant and embrace more modern like web developer experience stuff? It's my favorite way to quickly spin up a server in JavaScript, and I use it heavily. This is what we're using for webhook thing when you run it locally. It's really good experience. And yes, Fastify is by a lot of the Node people too, including Mateo. Phenomenal library. This is what I use when I'm hosting a web server from JavaScript almost always, if I'm not just using Nexts. Meteor. Oh, Meteor. Meteor was one of the first attempts to do like, how would I put Meteor? Stop fighting with frameworks and start shipping. The goal of Meteor was to be one of the first like GraphQL for all solutions, but I think they've moved away from GraphQL and towards an RPC thing. But like Meteor devolved and became partially like Apollo. But it was one of these early attempts at one API for everything with good developer experience. And it just, they took on too much at once, then went the GraphQL route. That went how it went. And now it's in a weird place, and I wouldn't recommend it. I want to skip over all of these more obscure ones. I just don't care. Because I want to talk about Redwood, because we were just talking about GraphQL and how stuffing it in the middle of things isn't the best idea. Redwood was one of the first attempts at a full stack framework that really built a layer between the backend and the front end. That layer happened to be a pile of GraphQL, which was useful if you ever wanted to build a mobile app that used different technologies, but most of the time wasn't the right bet. And even the Redwood contributors are largely not using the GraphQL part. I know that App Factory, who I had on my stream well over a year ago now to talk about Redwood, when he uses Redwood at his company, he rips out the GraphQL layer and threw TRPC in instead. So I personally not that into Redwood, but apparently they're focused on server components now, so I'm excited to see where that goes. Sales, Directus, and Amplification, I still don't care. Oh, Blitz. For those who aren't familiar, Blitz was very similar to like Create T3 app if all the dependencies were written by us. The goal of Create T3 app was to provide a really good full stack developer experience by using the best tools in the industry. The goal of Blitz was to provide the best full stack developer experience by rewriting all of the tools. And I think they kind of bit themselves with that. The biggest mistake they made is they forked Next and realized a year later how big of a mistake that was, and took all the things they built into it, ripped those out, made them packages, and then went back to vanilla Next and adding their stuff on top, kind of becoming a brutalist version of Create T3 app. I'll be honest in that I think I accidentally killed Blitz when we created Create T3 app, because it solved the problem that Blitz was trying to in a much more maintainable, modular way. And now Blitz is just not as big of a deal. The lead maintainer of Blitz has since left the project and is doing really cool stuff. She's incredible. And the original creator of Blitz, Brandon, has more focus on his company flight control. So I just don't see Blitz going anywhere anytime soon. I did try it. And as cool as it was to have something that felt kind of like Rails in the JavaScript world, it wasn't good enough. It just was not there for me. And I got really into TRPC and eventually built Create T3 app with my community because of how much Blitz didn't do what I needed it to. And we need to put some others in because people keep mentioning Elysia, which I absolutely want to put in here. Elysia's, think almost like Fastify for Bun, taking advantage of a lot of the native Bun stuff. It's in a really good state. Hano also deserves a mention. Hano is a web standard server, so you can run it trivially in everything from literally like the browser to Edge runtime to obviously Node. Really cool stuff. And thank you, chat, for reminding me the name of the Blitz maintainer I was thinking of was Alexandra Cora. She's incredible. Yeah, she is really, really, really good and one of my favorite like TypeScript developers. Anyways, JavaScript runtimes. Which engines do I normally use? Have to, Node, yeah, Dino. Yeah, I'll keep using Dino. For those who are curious, I use Dino for Advent of Code because I don't want to have to make a build pipe. I can just point at a TypeScript file and it does the right thing. And it's been really nice for me. So So I still use Dino. I don't use it for much production stuff, but I use it for quick scripts all the time. Hermes, I've absolutely used. If you're not already familiar with Hermes, it's the compiler JIT runtime for React Native. And you can use it for other things. Its goal is to make it so JavaScript can start up way faster. So you don't have to wait for it to init. So your app can behave a bit better when you open up an app for the first time. Service workers, really cool. We'll continue. Both of these I want to use again. And obviously Bun as well. Not super familiar with Chakra Core. It's a JavaScript engine with C. Edge no longer uses Chakra. Yeah, that's where I thought I knew about it from. So Chakra was how JavaScript used to run in Edge. And then when they moved to a Chrome-based core, they no longer were using this. So it's just not getting that much support anymore is my assumption. I expect that to stay that way. Yeah, excited for a little more innovation here. Also for the Winter CG group to make things between all of these runtimes a little more standard. But at this point in time, these are all the different ways you can run JavaScript, and it's a bit chaotic that things do and don't work between them ways you would or wouldn't expect. JavaScript Edge and serverless runtimes, which do you use? Lambda, I'll use again. Cloudflare workers, I'll use again. Netlify Edge functions I haven't really used. Google Cloud Functions, I hate. Edge runtime, I'll use again. Fly, I have never successfully deployed on. I've always had weird issues when I tried. DigitalOcean functions, I don't care. And Azure functions, I don't care. That was a quick section. Non-JavaScript languages. This is also going to be a quick section. Not saying other languages are bad, just saying that they're not for me. Which of these AI tools do I regularly use to help write code? I don't regularly use ChatGPT, but I've used it a few times. It's like 50-50 if it works for me or I hate it. Copilot, I'm addicted to. Never changing that. JetBrains, whatever. Cody, whatever. Codium, I am caring less and less as we scroll further. Oh, V0. I like V0. I just don't care. I'm expecting things to go way further next year, but I'm waiting for that to happen. We'll see what happens when more tools exist and people are refining the state of stuff. But right now, I'm still just a Copilot bro. Which of these have I used to host JavaScript? AWS is fine. Haven't really used Azure. Cloudflare is fine. DigitalOcean, no. Fastly, haven't used. Fly.io, bad experiences. GitHub Pages, overrated. Cool for static, but as soon as you do anything interesting, GitHub Pages falls apart. Google Cloud, miserable. Heroku, miserable. Netlify is fine. I used to use Netlify as my primary place, but the Vercel experience is just better for me. And having control of like where my code is running, the idea of like framework defined outputs, really good. Render, I also had issues trying to deploy to. That was back in like the early M1 days where I couldn't get their CLI to run without installing Rosetta. And even that was a bad experience, so I gave up on it. And obviously, I'm a Vercel bro. That's where I do most of my deployments now. Yeah, Railway should have been in here. Usage. How do I divide my time between writing JavaScript and TypeScript? Literally entirely TypeScript. If I'm writing vanilla JS, I'm miserable. I use JavaScript for everything I should and shouldn't do. Yeah, literally everything but embedded apps. I don't write embedded apps. Lol. Anyways, what industry sectors am I using JavaScript in? I guess technically consulting, education, entertainment. I mean, here we are, right? Marketing, sales, analytics tools. Yeah. Yep. I write JavaScript for a lot of reasons. Which of these architectures have I used? Single page app, multi-page app, static site, SSR, partial hydration, progressive hydration. I haven't actually used that. Islands architecture, progressive enhancement, ISG, streaming SSR, not resumability, edge rendering, and partial pre-rendering. Yeah. I've talked about these in a billion other videos. I'm not going to sit here and talk about each and every one of them. I already have like 2 videos about the different types of server rendering. I need to make a 3rd video about server rendering techniques. Let me know in the comments and I'll make that eventually. I know there's a lot of these now and they're all very different, but I think I've covered these things enough. Which aspects of JavaScript do I struggle with the most? Async, specifically async errors and handling weird ordering of things that can error at weird places. I need to do my deep dive on effect TS. We're starting to explore it for upload thing, but async can get miserable. Debugging in general, like it's good, but it's not as good as it could be, especially once you have issues between the server and the client and need to debug like requests and network things happening on the server side and you don't have browser tools. Rough. So those are probably my biggest pain points. And then build tools, specifically around mono repos. I think that's a fair way of stating the pain points I deal with regularly. What do I feel is missing from JavaScript? Up to 3 items. Pipe, please give me pipe operator. Please, for the love of God, give me a pipe operator. I want pattern matching a lot, and I do want immutable data. I'd say those are the 3 for me. All of these you can make a good argument for. Obviously, having TypeScript style types as comments would be really nice, but I want all of the other things more. I really want pipes to be standard so that like your IDEs and things support them and we can use them everywhere. And I want that to be a standard. I have a whole video about why I think pipes should be in JavaScript, so feel free to find that on my channel. I think web dev is better than it's ever been. And I know that's controversial, but you don't know how bad things were and how much better they're getting every day. So I'm very happy. And how do I feel about the general state of JavaScript? Also very happy. We've made so much progress over the last few years and it's still getting better every day. Resources. Which paid resources have I used? I haven't used it for a while, but I used to use that quite a bit. Programming related podcasts. I don't really listen to podcasts. Which programming related video creators? Jack Harrington, Josh Tried Code, Big Box, SWE, Melky, I've watched quite a bit. Oh, Low Level Learning. I've been watching all of Low Level's videos about the advent of code stuff recently. I watch Fireship a bit. He's not like a go-to for me. Just Tried Coding. Thank you for the correction there. Who watches Trash's videos? No. In Bash Bunny. I can add Theo. Am I out of space? Can I not add more? Because who am I replacing with Ryan Carniato? I watch my stuff. I watch so much of my stuff. I watch more of my stuff than Tija's by quite a bit. So I'm putting me at the bottom there still. Which individuals do you read, follow, or just want to highlight? Ryan Carniato. This week in React. I just want to get his name correct. Sebastian Lorber. If you're not already familiar with Lorber, last time I mentioned him in a video, it blew up. So I'm going to do it again. This week in React's one of the few things I actually regularly read to keep up with what's going on in the React world. It often has things I missed. Obviously, now I'm on top of things enough. I don't miss things as regularly, but his weekly updates for what's going on in React are very, very handy. And I recommend giving him a follow on Twitter, checking out his newsletter if you haven't already, because it's a great way to keep up with the stuff. Oh, howdy, Sebastian. Didn't know you were in chat. Who else do I keep up with? Who else posts things that I love? I was trying to think through who, when they post something, I immediately jump on it. Lee Rob is a good one to call out. Sebastian Markbidge from the React team. Tanner. Josh Comio, yes. I think that's most of the ones that I'm really looking at the content of this year. I love Dan Abramov, but this year was not a big one for things to keep up with. I should put Dan. I love Kent Dodds, but I don't read a lot of his stuff nowadays. I think Matt Pocock's a fairer one to put. Oh, Rich Harris. Obviously Rich Harris. Oh, Dominic, I have to do. TK Dodo. I think I've covered most of the people I regularly read from. There are so many others that are great, but those are the ones that I look into and read stuff from the most. Oh, I've done most of these. Did that. Oh, I haven't done most of them. I've done all of those though. Cool. And now about me. Good old 28. Oh, I should have put Jen's. Yeah, I'm going to go back and put Jen's in that. You guys aren't already familiar with Jenna. She is one of the creators of Radix UI. Very, very, very talented JavaScript dev that I've learned a ton from, a personal hero. She doesn't post as much nowadays, but when she does write a post, it's always good. I love all of the content she's ever published. Highly recommend giving her a follow if you haven't. It's you'll be pretty early on it because 7,000 followers for somebody who's produced this much valuable content in the dev ecosystem is insulting. So make sure you give Jenna a follow. I'm in the top 6% of all respondents. That's actually lower than a lot of the surveys I've done in the past. Good stuff, though. This is a phenomenal survey, as always. Oh, Sophie Albert. I should have put Sophie in too. Fuck. Very fair point. God damn it. It's so hard to list all the people that I learn from and look up to. It's such an awesome industry with so many dope people. One of the awesome people that I regularly forget about is Satya, the creator of these surveys, and he absolutely killed it with this one. The team's working really hard to keep us up to date on what's going on in the JavaScript ecosystem and how are people feeling about these things. So once again, huge shout out to them. If you haven't already done the survey, go do it because we can learn a lot as a community from the results of these things. And I think it's really important. So yeah, go give the survey a shot. Appreciate y'all a ton as always. If you want to see my thoughts on the CSS one we did recently, I'll pin that in the corner here. Appreciate y'all as always. See you guys in the next one. Peace, nerds.